And we open tonight's newscast with news that the helicopter of Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi was involved in an incident this afternoon near the border with Azerbaijan. The helicopter was traveling in a convoy of 3 when it lost contact and had to make an emergency landing. Search and rescue were reportedly called to the scene. Reports are still vague as to what caused the incident and the fate of the passengers, which also included Iran's foreign minister. Day 226 of the war in Gaza. The IDF has been conducting ongoing airstrikes, hitting more than 70 Hamas targets throughout Gaza over the past 24 hours, with ground forces operating in several areas. The IDF also announced the deaths of 2 soldiers. Meanwhile, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has arrived in Israel from Saudi Arabia for key talks with Prime Minister Netanyahu. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
Ground forces are operating in Rafah, Jabalia, and in the Netzarim corridor, and not without casualties. The army announced the deaths of 2 soldiers from the Givati reconnaissance unit killed during fighting in southern Gaza. The IDF said that paratroopers killed dozens of terror operatives during fierce clashes in the heart of Jabalia, in neighborhoods that the military did not operate in previously. The airstrikes targeted weapons depots, infrastructure, and key operatives. One of those killed was the top Islamic Jihad commander in Rafah. In eastern Rafah, Givati Brigade troops raided several sites in the area, locating weapons, and the Agos Commando Unit located a rocket launcher at a building used by a terror group. In the center, the 99th Division continued to battle gunmen in the Netzarim corridor area, including by calling in airstrikes to kill operatives. Meanwhile, the U.S. pier built on the Gaza coast is now fully operational. Trucks of humanitarian aid began moving ashore through a temporary pier built by the U.S. military with Israeli cooperation. The pier is bringing humanitarian aid to Gaza by sea for the first time in 2 months. Humanitarian aid organizations will coordinate distribution inside the enclave. Pentagon officials said they were initially aiming to deliver about 90 trucks of aid each day, increasing that to about 150 trucks when the operation reaches capacity. The U.S. military emphasized that no American troops entered Gaza and that it was providing only logistical support for the delivery of the aid. Israel is fully supporting the effort.
It sends a clear message about our intentions. Israel is trying to alleviate the suffering caused by the war Hamas started on October 7th.
U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan arrived in Israel from Saudi Arabia and talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The pair discussed a pathway forward in normalization with Israel, part of a semi-final version of strategic agreements between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. Sullivan's talks today with Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly focused on the Rafah operation, entry of humanitarian aid, and a potential pathway for a Palestinian state, vital for the normalization agreement with the Saudis.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Hamas-Israel war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And regarding the hostages, it was a bittersweet weekend for Israelis when they learned that the dead bodies of 4 hostages had been recovered during an IDF operation in Gaza. The operation was based on IDF intelligence from the Shin Bet, Israel Security Agency. There are still 128 hostages being held in Gaza by Hamas. More on this from ILTV's Rachel Safdie.
Hi, I'm reporting here from the Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. As we have some latest updates, the IDF has recovered the bodies of 4 hostages that were being held by Hamas in captivity in Gaza. This comes as the UN Security Council has just held their first ever session on the hostages since October 7th. Here's my full report. The IDF has recovered the bodies of hostages Itzhak Gellerenter, Amit Buskila, Shani Luke, and Ron Binyamin in Gaza. The military announced over the weekend that soldiers recovered the bodies of the hostages as intensive fighting raged there between Israeli forces and Hamas. Until recently, both Gellerenter and Buskila were presumed to be alive, while Luke was confirmed dead in late October after a piece of her skull was identified following widely shared footage of terrorists kidnapping her. Nissim Luke, Shani Luke's father, told Channel 12 News that while the announcement of the IDF recovering her body was difficult, it was also long awaited, as he had been officially informed over 6 months ago of Shani's death. The families of Gelarenter and Buskila, however, stated they are grappling with difficult feelings in the wake of the news after holding out hope for months that their loved ones would return alive. For the first time since October 7th, the UN Security Council convened a meeting solely focused on the hostages held by Hamas. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield emphasized the demand to bring these hostages representing 20 countries safely home, while emotions ran high as South Korea's deputy ambassador choked up while speaking of hostage Hersh Goldberg Polin. Israeli Ambassador Gilad Erdan said, "The hostages are the most urgent and critical humanitarian issue that the Council must focus on." The UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict was supposed to attend the hearing but withdrew days in advance, reportedly not due to scheduling issues but due to political pressure, as her office faced criticism for not prioritizing the plight of Israeli hostages over Palestinians. And in a rally in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, Etin Golan, who represented Israel at this year's Eurovision Song Contest, sang the original version of the song October Rain, after the European Broadcasting Union disqualified the song for having political messaging. She sang the original lyrics for Israelis. Some 128 hostages remain in Gaza.
Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still waiting from this October rain.
And in other news, a political crisis is brewing as National Unity Party leader Benny Gantz, one of the few members to sit in the war cabinet, issued an ultimatum to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying he would quit the government if no plan for a post-war Gaza was implemented. The details in the following report. War Cabinet Minister and head of the National Unity Party Benny Gantz issued a very public ultimatum to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Saturday night. Formulate a strategic plan for the war or his party will quit the government. He gave a deadline of June 8th. Gantz called on Netanyahu to implement 6 strategic goals, including a plan to bring the hostages home, topple the Hamas regime and ensure Israeli security control, alongside establishing an American, European, Arab, Palestinian administration to manage Gaza, as well as to return displaced residents to their homes in the north and to promote normalization with Saudi Arabia. Gantz also took aim at the nationalist elements within the coalition, saying they are sailing Israel into the rocks. The political crisis came just one day before White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan arrives in Israel from Saudi Arabia, and as the U.S. pushes for a Saudi normalization deal that will include a commitment by Israel to a future Palestinian state. Sullivan is set to hold separate meetings with Netanyahu and Gantz. The Prime Minister's office replied to the ultimatum and said that instead of presenting an ultimatum to Hamas, Gantz presented an ultimatum to the Prime Minister. Netanyahu's office slammed the ultimatum as a defeat for Israel, an abandonment of the hostages, saying it would ensure the survival of Hamas and the formation of a Palestinian state. Israel on Friday found itself in front of the International Court of Justice in The Hague once again, having to counter South Africa's claims of genocide and its request for the court to issue a ruling for an immediate ceasefire. This marks the 4th time in 5 months South Africa has asked the court to issue an emergency ruling against Israel. Israel in turn called the accusations utterly baseless, making a mockery of actual genocide, and slammed South Africa's attempt to exploit the court to protect its ally Hamas. Israel on Friday countered South Africa's appeal to the International Court of Justice at The Hague, which asked to issue emergency orders against Israel to halt the ongoing military operation in Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip and force a ceasefire.
The decision of the Israeli cabinet and their implementation on the ground leave no doubt that South Africa's allegations regarding genocide are completely and utterly baseless.
South Africa claimed at The Hague on Thursday that Israel's limited military operation in Rafah is its endgame, the culmination of its efforts to commit genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, and it called for the court to issue a ruling for an immediate ceasefire. Israel dismissed these claims as outrageous and utterly baseless and said the case was an exploitation of international law and an inversion of reality.
South Africa presents the court yet again, for the fourth time within the scope of less than 5 months, with a picture that is completely divorced from the facts and circumstances. Israel is engaged in a difficult and tragic armed conflict. South Africa ignores this factual context, which is essential in order to comprehend the situation, and also ignores the applicable legal framework of international humanitarian law. It makes a mockery of the heinous charge of genocide.
The Israeli legal team also countered claims that Israel was not allowing sufficient international aid into Gaza, detailing its humanitarian efforts, and slammed South Africa for turning to the court in order to, quote, obtain military advantage for its ally Hamas, which it does not wish to see defeated. Israel noted that South Africa hosted a Hamas delegation mere days before it submitted its latest case to the court. The Israeli team said South Africa did not use the meeting to urge Hamas to release the hostages or stop targeting Israeli civilians or to cease operating from hospitals and UN facilities, but rather to continue to coordinate the campaign against Israel on the battlefield and in the courtroom. And joining us now with more on the proceedings at the International Court of Justice is Nitzana Darshan-Leitner, founder and president of Shurat Hadin. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So South Africa dragging Israel to the World Court for the fourth time in 5 months. It keeps asking for emergency measures. The court has so far not ruled in its favor, and yet it keeps on trying. I mean, is this, as the Israeli team claimed, an exploitation of international law?
Well, South Africa is serving as the legal arm of Hamas. South Africa was dragged into the International Court of Justice by the Iranian regime. Their claim is that Israel commits genocide, but they have troubles proving it, because in order to prove genocide, you have to prove two components. One, pattern, that really many people getting killed on a daily basis. But the second one is intention. And whereas South Africa claims that Israel killed 30,000 civilians in Gaza, which by then, as we all know, the number went down recently by the UN investigation, they have troubles proving intention.
And at what point can the court, or should the court, simply dismiss this case?
Unfortunately, the court is a political court. As long as they have judges representing hostile countries to Israel, the case will continue. It should have been dismissed on the spot. I agree. But this is not the case. They want to drag it on to a point that perhaps they will find Israel does commit genocide in Gaza. This point will never happen, because Israel, especially after being warned by the International Criminal Court, by the Biden administration, by the rest of the world, is very cautious sometimes, afraid to say, by undermining soldiers' life, just to make sure that not so many civilians will be killed. Israel has to turn and shift the burden of proof to show that Hamas is the one that commits war crimes. They are the one who surround themselves with human shields. And if civilians are getting killed in Gaza, is a result of Hamas action solely, not to impose any responsibility on the Israeli government.
And so what can or should we expect moving forward? I mean, when will the court issue its ruling on Rafah and on the larger case of genocide?
So in the temporary injunctions that South Africa was asking, which Egypt joined, because Egypt now is very afraid of the IDF entering Rafah, pushing supposedly all the residents of Rafah into the border with Egypt. This will be given in the coming days because it's a temporary injunction. For the entire case, that might take months for the court to rule on it.
And is Israel able to receive a fair trial at the World Court? I mean, video surfaced this past week of the president of the court, a Lebanese judge, calling Israel an apartheid state, making very biased and harsh statements against Israel in the past. How can he still be allowed to oversee the case?
That's a problem. That's a problem. This is why Israel tried to avoid so far any international proceedings in any international tribunal, because we know we will not get a fair trial. Israel chose to participate in this proceeding this time because it's a signatory to the treaty against genocide, and as such, they felt uncomfortable to avoid these proceedings. Also, they felt that they have a chance to overcome this proceeding because, as I said before, it's very hard to prove genocide in Gaza. Israel took the risk. Israel will participate, knowing that the court might rule against it. As we know, it represents the Security Council representative state, which most of them are hostile to Israel.
All right, thank you, Nitzana.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And now, since October 7th, the World Jewish Congress has intensified efforts to empower young Jewish leaders. This month, a significant delegation to Israel for Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day, highlighted the intersection of sports, remembrance, and education, reinforcing solidarity and fostering cooperation among global Jewish communities. If you want to join the effort to support Israel, scan the QR code. Your contribution can make a significant impact in empowering the community and ensuring a brighter future. ILTV's Ariel Elhiani has the report.
Since October 7th, significant developments have shaped the path for younger Jewish leaders. The World Jewish Congress, led by President Ronald S. Lauder, has prioritized this effort. In June 2023, under President Isaac Herzog, the WJC launched the Jewish Leadership Bridge for the Future, a historic forum that brought together 250 young leaders from Israel and the diaspora to discuss Jewish unity. This month, the WJC and the German Football League hosted a special delegation to Israel for Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Officials from German football clubs participated in commemorative events, including a ceremony at Yad Vashem and a workshop on the Holocaust significance and the role of sports in promoting tolerance. In Tel Aviv, the delegation met with the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, showing solidarity with affected families. They also visited Kibbutz Kfar Aza, hosted by the family of Netta Epstein, a local soccer player tragically killed in an attack. The WJC will launch Football and Memory at UEFA Euro 2024, connecting attendees with Holocaust history, and an exhibit titled Sports, Crowds, Power, to explore sports under National Socialism. This delegation's visit underscores the intersection of sports, remembrance, and education. The WJC continued this momentum with a new delegation of young leaders in Israel from May 5th to May 8th, visiting affected communities and engaging with experts. The goal was to foster cooperation and solidarity with local counterparts in southern Israel. This forum included discussions on strengthening Jewish identity and redefining the Israel diaspora relationship, representing critical steps towards collaborative outcomes.
There has been ongoing rocket fire in the north, with at least 75 projectiles fired towards Israel in the past 24 hours. The Prime Minister's office announced that Netanyahu will meet the mayors of northern towns evacuated after October 7th. And from the north to Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, where the IDF carried out a rare fighter jet attack targeting a leading terrorist operative in Jenin. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz has the details.
Dozens of drone strikes have been carried out by the IDF against terrorist targets in Judea and Samaria since October 7th, largely amid clashes between troops and armed cells. But the targeting in Jenin was carried out by a fighter jet, a rare occurrence in the territories. The man killed was Islam Hamaisa, who the IDF said was wanted over his involvement in a series of terror attacks, including the murder of Israeli Meir Tamiri in June 2023 that wounded 4 soldiers and 1 civilian. The army said fighter jets and attack helicopters targeted a building used as an operational war room by Jenin's terror network, and that several gunmen were gathered at the command room when it was struck, including those involved in several shooting attacks in the Jenin area. The army said that the terror network was planning additional attacks. The IDF has intensified nearly daily raids across Judea and Samaria in the aftermath of Hamas's October 7th attack. Since October 7th, troops have arrested some 4,000 wanted Palestinians across the territories.
An incidence of anti-Semitism around the world over the weekend, from a synagogue lit on fire in France to a Jewish man brutally attacked in Belgium to a child that needed to be accompanied to school due to anti-Semitic harassment. There is a global spike in anti-Semitism around the world, and it does not seem to be abating. The details in the following report.
An Israeli tourist in Bulgas, Belgium, was brutally attacked by several men in front of his family after he removed an anti-Israel sticker at the train station. Video of the incident filmed by his daughter shows the father, 64-year-old Amnon Ohana, pursued and hit by one of the attackers before several others joined in. Meanwhile, in France, Saturday prayers took place outside the synagogue in Rouen after it was set on fire by an armed man Friday. The arsonist, of Algerian origin, was shot dead by police after officials said he rushed a police officer with a knife.
Cet acte antisémite à Rouen nous touche tous profondément et je veux redire en cette veille de Shabbat que nous sommes au ministère de l'Intérieur extrêmement déterminés à continuer à protéger l'intégralité, où qu'ils se trouvent, des Juifs de France qui doivent pratiquer leur religion sans peur.
France has seen a huge spike in anti-Semitic acts since October 7th. It recorded 366 anti-Semitic acts in the first 3 months of 2024, 3 times as many as in the same time period the year prior. And in Canada, an incredible display of solidarity. Hundreds of people arrived in Toronto to show their support and to escort a 13-year-old boy to school after he had been subjected to continued anti-Semitic harassment by other children.
And now, in a touching show of solidarity and remembrance, the Israeli dance studio dancers performed a routine in honor of the victims of the Nova Music Festival attack. And ILTV's Devo Klein has the story.
In an incredible show of solidarity, the Israeli dance studio group performed a dance number at the Nova Festival site, located in the Re'im forest in southern Israel. The dance, titled Nova, pays tribute to the over 360 dancers at the Nova Music Festival who, while celebrating peace and unity, were brutally attacked, murdered, and kidnapped. Among the dancers was Michal Ohana, a survivor from the Nova massacre. Ohana shared that dancing has the power to conquer all.
So on October 7, I was here. I'm a survivor for the Nova Festival. They shot me on my leg and I was under the tank for 7 hours. And we're here today to make a dancing for the Nova Festival. We're dancing the love, we're dancing the pain, we're dancing the hope.
American influencer Montana Tucker joined the dance group as she shared her mission of bringing awareness to the atrocities committed by Hamas.
People are forgetting about this already, and they're forgetting about the innocent lives that were taken and the innocent victims, and trying to now bring awareness back to it because people need to never forget.
After undergoing unquestionable trauma, Nova survivors believe that they will dance again.
And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 20 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Tomorrow, partly cloudy conditions continue alongside rising temperatures set to reach highs of 34 degrees Celsius or 91 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's newscast. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm the Darga Velazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.